You're listening to the Omnicast. I'm Tyler Jacobson with Dan and Nix. That's what I got.
That's what you got?
And our guest today is Connor Hudson from Pineapple Agency. Connor, tell us what you do and how you got to Denver.
Yeah. First off, thank you guys so much for having me on. Really excited to talk about a lot of stuff here.
He talks like people listen to this.
Yeah, exactly. Say hi to my mom.
Hey, mom. How you doing? But no, so I worked at a company called Havas Chicago for about 3.5, 4 years. Met a lot of really cool people and got to work on the experiential team there. It's a pretty giant agency, but we were a small team, so we kind of were just living in this constant paradox, which was kind of funny, but also, really cool and also challenging. Lots of different stuff. I moved to this offshoot company called the Annex, which is part of the Havas network, and we did lots of different stuff for brands ranging from Hefty Reynolds to Fruit Gushers to Hamburger Helper, sort of across the board, just lots of different stuff, all based in experience marketing. And then, I had been there for a bit and really was looking for something new. Had been in Chicago my whole life, and the mountains were calling me a little bit. And so worked out something with this really amazing company called the Pineapple Agency, which is, 5 years young, I think, and still definitely, figuring out the best way to do experiential, which is this ever-growing beast of a thing that, constantly the definition is changing. And
so let's stop there real quick. Yeah. So I think that when you say experiential, I think there's a lot of crossover between event and experiential and installation and all that stuff. Right. Like, so talk to me about what experiential, like how you define it and what those differentiators are.
Yeah. So, I think that's constantly challenging because it, in a certain sense, it is kind of defined by our clients, where, we can do the song and dance and we can sell our brand of experiential to people. But a lot of times brands are looking for, whether it's trade show stuff, whether it's going to a major event, sponsoring an event, doing their own event. It's this thing that's constantly shifting and it's all over the place. It could be a stunt on the street. It could be a parade float. And so it's this thing where the way that we've been talking about it is, experience marketing kind of has this way of creating really tangible moments and results for brands in the real world, which I think is a thing that is this sort of fleeting place right now, just with how over digital everything is and how we're just being really. But
aren't you looking for a digital outcome at the end of a lot of this?
Exactly. And that's where, okay. It's this hilarious thing where I think experiential for content has never been more important. And I think where that comes in on the digital side is that, I think when you do experiential the right way, you can use the things that happen at those experiences or the excitement that's generated from that and use that for digital or, visual marketing online as well.
So I guess the event marketing, versus experiential. Event is simply being there, right? And trying to get some attention. Experiential it's almost transformative, right?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. I would say that, there's some really good experiential marketing that is being there at events, right?
Sure.
Is that I think that the best ways to activate at events are to do something truly experiential and in a way that really enhances people's times at those events. But yeah, I think the way that we think about experiential and the way that we talk about it is definitely, just providing something where it really does, create that experience that has a lasting impression and, it leaves an imprint on somebody.
Okay, cool. Dannon, do you have any questions?
He always just puts me on the spot like this.
Of course. It's his podcast. You're supposed to have a conversation.
No.
I'm just making sure. Connor did a lot of talking there, and I'm going to do a lot of talking, and then you don't do a lot of talking, so I want to make sure
attention to levels, man.
Oh, okay.
Someone's got to make all this tick.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good.
So when we're talking about experiential marketing, and I like what you said about it's not just having a booth, it's creating it's an experience that actually is transformative and changes the way people feel about, in our case, a brand, right? Yeah. So it's not just making a tent, it's making a reason for people to actually like your brand.
Yeah.
I was going somewhere with that.
Well, no. I mean, I totally, I definitely understand where you're going with that for sure. And I think that, it's a thing that you can do a really good booth, or you can do a really good tent, or, any sort of simple activation. It's just what really shouldn't and can't get lost is the message behind why you're doing it, and like the deeper meaning behind it. Is that, I think one of the things that this is something that, sort of just gets at me a little bit is the spinning wheel game. I'm sure that you guys have seen that, all over the place, where it's a thing where, a brand shows up and they have a spinning wheel, and they're
like a wheel of fortune.
Yeah. You spin the wheel and it has a chart of prizes, and the lines are out the door,
You win a visor.
Yeah, and people are they're so excited to win it, and so they're just win anything, and so the line is there, but I think the reality is that for as many people as they saw that day was the actual like brand message achieved, like the company that sponsored that, did they have any really solid conversations with people, and I think probably through the activation, maybe not. They might have had somebody walk away with a visor or, a pair of branded sunglasses. But, I think it is a thing where I think brands need to really look at the way that they're activating in the live space with people. Yeah.
Using that example specifically, it's a really hard thing to measure, right? Like how effective was your presence at a trade show?
Yeah.
Or how effective was your presence at CES? So if you're doing the Wheel of Fortune and you have a line out the door, in your experience, are you finding brands misconstrue that for success?
Yeah.
I would almost guess, and I could be wrong here, but I would almost guess that they said, okay, well, we did this. We were at this event. We sponsored it. We had the table. We had the spinning wheel. There were lines, and we gave out all of the brand, all the little things that hold your credit card that go on the back of your cell phone, right?
Pop sockets. Yep. Very popular.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can say we've done that. That has to somehow contribute to our overall success, and we spent marketing budget.
Right.
And so really it's I can't decide if that makes a lot of good sense to put money in things to have those brand touches and those consistent brand touches and not be able to necessarily account for them, versus saying you get a free pass here because you're just spending marketing budget and you had that awareness, but it doesn't equal success for the brand at the end of the day. And if you never did that, wouldn't change anything about our brand. Yeah. And I don't know where you find it. I don't know where so I guess traditionally I would be saying, okay, let's go for an entire year and stop being at these places that we are traditionally. And let's see if we see an uptick or a downtick. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in today's corporate structure, that's a hard.
Well, you're going to lose marketing budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I know we've talked about this a lot previously, and that is, why are people actually doing this? And I think a lot of times it's not there.
I think, one of the things that I'm really happy is starting to be talked about is differentiating between the typical way that we look at return on investment for the things that we do. The new term that's starting to get thrown around is return on experience. And I think that it's something that the way that we usually look at investment and the way that we measure our stuff is through click-through rate, or the amount of people that we see and the amount of eyeballs that are looking at an ad. And I think it's so different with experience marketing, is that it's something that it's really how many people you truly engaged, and that's the way that I think.
Okay. So how do you measure that?
So I think that there are a few different ways that we've been seeing it happen, and we touched on one earlier, which is content created in the space. And I think when we touch on content, and I think that can be really just wow-worthy stuff that can sort of look different in people's feeds and make people really excited and have wanted to be there. And I don't think that we're talking as much about a step and repeat with a couple logos in the back. I think it's something that you have to push that a little bit further.
But even with the step and repeat, I think that what you're looking for there, at least in my view of it, isn't so much that person who's sitting there advocating for the brand. It's their audience who sees this person advocating for a third party brand.
Yeah.
That's really not, hey, I got this amazing experience, brought to me by AT&T.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right.
But then they go out and they put that on Instagram and social. If you have a couple friends who are experiencing that, then I think that creates that third party advocacy, which is going to be so powerful.
And I think that third party advocacy needs to also be backed up with different touch points past that. Is that, you get the logo recognition from some of those posts that come out, but it's what are people doing in the space there that, can create, whether it's real data for people, or whether it's a way of following up with them after the event and, just, keeping in touch, and not in a way where it's like, dropping emails or something, but next time that they do another cool event or something like that, they can continue to bring that base and, just sort of grow that excitement over time.
Okay. So I think we've got a good foundation here.
I think so. Yeah.
So we're going to, so that's the end of the show. Thank you so much, Connor.
That was great.
Appreciate it. So let's go with a premise here. As we do on this show, we start out with a premise, we see how we can make it better, and then we throw it out. And that's the formula today. It could be all done by the next episode. We'll see.
Yeah, cool.
So let's go with this premise. I've got a trade show coming up, and I just need my brand to be present there, right? We paid for the space, and I don't have a trade show booth. So can you just give me a tent, or can you give me a background and then maybe something in front of my table?
Yeah. So I think that is oftentimes a usual ask that comes into a lot of marketing agencies. If it's not that, it's something close to that,
right?
Where it's like, we want this thing and we have this amount of space and this is what we want to do. And I think, usually what we're trying to challenge our clients to do, and what we're trying to challenge ourselves to do as well, is really figure out what that brand is trying to achieve. If they're going to that trade show, why are they going to that trade show? Who are they trying to talk to there?
Well, and trade shows are traditionally very difficult on brands even buying that space, because they're like, we were there, but we didn't get any good quality leads. We've never turned anybody from a trade show. I mean, I've heard that story quite often. And I don't know if you have as well.
A lot. And yeah.
So just going with that tent or that background premise, right? Yeah. Let's just say that you couldn't talk me off of that, or I didn't have a budget to go much further than that. Right. Now, how can that experience be elevated? What's the inherent downfall with just being there and then having again like a trifold background or having a tent there?
Yeah, I think.
Why is that a big waste of money and it's diminishing returns just right out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're at this point really lost in a sea of all of that. There's any trade show that I've ever been to, especially in the vendor and brand sections, it's the same booth over and over and over again, in different ways. And there are some different ways that you can have meaningful conversations at the booth, for sure.
Right.
But I think, just to your point about how I think, falling for the same trick time and time again, which is, okay, we have, a great location in this trade show and we're going to meet all of the potential customers that we need to, is, it can only be one small piece of the puzzle, as opposed to, being a thing that is really what you're putting all of your eggs into. It can't be like, you're saying like, okay, we're going to South by Southwest and we're going to make a splash at South by Southwest, and then we're going to reap the rewards for the rest of the year. Right. It's like, it's a thing that, like, if you have the start of something really special at South by Southwest, it's a good way of getting a lot of attention on it, but then you need to follow through with that in different ways that aren't just isolated to that booth or to that space.
Okay, so how do I make that space better? So one of the ways I've seen it work really well was I went to NAMM a few years ago for ZT amplifiers, or with ZT amplifiers, because their whole team was there. And what I saw was, I went to I think it's Wave Audio. You can tell me the software.
Yep.
And they had Butch Vig, who produced Nirvana's Nevermind, and then he was also in Garbage. And he was showing how he produced one of a band I love, Soundtrack of Our Lives. He showed how he used Wave to produce Soundtrack of Our Lives. So really, without very much, I mean, they had a screen and they had a table for the most part. That's really all of their installation that I could see. But they showed somebody who is a well-regarded professional with a lot of name recognition saying, this is how this benefits me, right? And so it's an attractor right there.
Yeah.
It's Instagram worthy, and it didn't require a massive setup, and it's all about benefits. So you're walking away with that going, okay, I didn't just have an experience. I had an experience that actually related to the benefit of this brand.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I can see that brands aren't really leveraging that in a typical environment. That's one way to elevate that experience.
Now, in that experience, though, did they have anything that would actually help them track and measure the success of that?
Outside of sales at the end of the year, I don't know that they do.
Right, because I think that was where you were heading to is.
Well, there would have been social media. There would have been some social media accounts that you would have said, okay, are there hashtags there? And honestly, I don't remember well enough if they were if they had their own hashtags for the event, but you could have gotten that, and it was certainly you would. You're sitting, a couple feet away from Butch Vig while he's showing you how he produced a song.
Right. But I think that's where you were going, Connor. Is it? No longer can it just be about showing up and having a booth and talking to people. It has to be, well, how do you turn that into, how do you go from the trade show to continuing that contact in an online platform, and how do you turn that into a sale?
Definitely. But I also think that, sometimes, especially with this type of thing, and this isn't, probably the most popular answer because we're trying to put numbers behind everything for sure. But I mean, just
maybe we're not. I don't know.
Industry standard type thing. But I think the reality is that something like that and that type of nod of approval is something that that's really rare in today's world, where it's a thing where Taylor Swift holds up a Pepsi can, right? And she takes a photo with it on Instagram and she sends that out. I'm not sure how many of her fans are really Taylor Swift loves Pepsi, so I love Pepsi. I think that now a lot of her fans are awesome, Taylor Swift got a Pepsi endorsement. She's really made it.
It's inauthentic.
Right.
The liking of Pepsi is inauthentic.
It doesn't connect in any way because, you don't really believe that Pepsi is filling a need in Taylor Swift's life or, in anything that she does. So I think the example that you used is something where, that actual point of value is established through what they did. So they showed up and they went the extra mile. They actually connected the dots to make that come to life, which I think is different. And, I think that's one way of doing it for sure, of having more impact in settings like that. And then I think one other way that's going to be really important is to just get people involved. I think making things more interactive is a thing that seems really simple. But if it's, and it doesn't have to be a super, huge setup or anything, but if it's a thing where you can get them, whether it's creating something or being a part of something that's sort of built, as long as the trade show goes on. One, it's a really good way.
But now you're going beyond the original premise.
So,
or are you?
I don't think so. Cause okay. I think that, that's usually part of the ask from brands is they're we want to show up to these trade shows and we want to make a big splash. And, to them that often means we'll show up with our thing, we'll have giant screens, or we'll have a dance party in the middle of the day or something like that. And I think that that's sort of in their vernacular, but I think what they're missing is that people aren't just really excited by these big splashy things anymore. They want to be involved in the conversation. And I think if you have a booth where you can facilitate somebody able to be a part of whatever conversation is being had, whether it's through them creating something or through them giving their point of view.
Okay.
I think that's connecting both points of the conversation and getting away from something that I think we've been talking about, which is, showing up with a presentation and just being here's step A through Z about how you can interact with the product.
So it almost might be what is the easiest way to get people to enjoy themselves and maybe even create on your home turf.
Right. And almost for you in a way that doesn't feel intrusive.
Okay.
Creating content from the place that they're going to share on your behalf, which is something that we've talked about, a little earlier. But, I think what that does too is that it gives you more time with them, which is where you can start to get a lot of the information that we were talking about as far as being able to follow up. I think that's a huge thing, is that, I think you're kind of crazy a little bit to think that somebody's going to spend more than 5 minutes with you at a trade show where there's hundreds of other brands. So you only have that 5 minutes. So how you use that 5 minutes, and, as opposed to just trying to get an email list going, it's like, a way where you can give them something special and then use that to be a catalyst to follow up with them later.
Well, and I love what you just said about you're crazy if you think you can get more than 5 minutes, because I can't tell you how many times I've been at trade shows and somebody's trying to engage me in like a 20-minute demo. It's like, I might be interested in this in a completely different environment, but right now, I'm even happy to become a lead for you. But let me get hear your elevator pitch and move on.
Well, and is that a sign of how trade shows have changed over time?
I mean, they're bigger than they've ever been.
Exactly. So 10 years ago, when you go to a trade show, like look at South by Southwest, it was a tiny, tiny little thing.
Comparatively, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Even CES 15 years ago was a small trade show.
Right.
And now they're crazy. They're events. So
now robots are getting run over. Yeah.
Well, and so like that time has just gotten, so much smaller because people have so much more to do.
And I think one of the things that goes along with it, and maybe this is where you were heading, Dannon, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but that also, because now you have so much competition for attention, that your ability to grab attention, that competition has gotten so much more aggressive. You simply can't show up and then, and expect anybody to care simply because your product is great. You have to be making a bigger splash.
Right.
Yeah. And, even going past that too, is that, I think trade shows were a really good way of doing networking maybe 10 years ago. And I think now that there are so many different tools that have sort of been, implemented, like, just constant email and just digital communication there's a thing where, everything is pouring in. And so it's a thing where everybody has a preconceived notion about a brand before they show up to a trade show now, or they're like seeking them out as opposed to, it being more of an exploration. So,
okay, hold on. Let's go with that for a second.
Cool.
Because I think that actually signals opportunity.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking about it as the trade show, which is funny because I just had a conversation this week all about like, hey, how do we capitalize on these 2 days here?
Right.
Should we be running digital ads? And it's like, no, don't spend money there. Yeah. But okay, now how do you set up for that? How do you start styling your brand to this? How do you start getting people who are likely to go to that convention to start understanding you and get hyped to actually come to your booth once they're there? So if you put all of that work on the front end and you find a way to channel their attention to you before people even walk in the door,
right,
you're already ahead of the game and doing something that your competitors aren't going to do.
So how do you become a destination at the trade show?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's something that you're starting to see a little bit more of. You're starting to see brands pre-promote, or like when they're about to go to a big expo or something and say, stop by our booth, lucky winner is something that's thrown around or something like that. But also they're doing a good job of establishing that before, during.
So brands are already doing that.
They're starting to.
So I'm not really that creative.
No,
I get it. No, it's fine, Connor. Just say it. I mean, everybody's already thinking.
No. No, it's just a thing that I don't think that they're doing it, right necessarily. I think that they're buying into, okay, we're going to this trade show. We're going to buy into their email list. We're going to send them an email beforehand. And I think, one thing that's going to be really important is that they don't start, or that brands stop just using these trade shows as their one opportunity.
Right.
Is that I think that, any leads or contacts that are captured at the trade show or before needs to just contribute to an overall marketing mix.
Yeah, and I think if you're selling a $5 item that's very transactional, one-time thing, you don't need to think about how long your sales cycle is, because it's an easy yes or it's an easy no.
Yeah.
But every time something gets a little bit more expensive, it becomes harder to say yes to it. It requires more nurturing. It requires more touch points.
Right.
So if you're in an industry where you're going to actually have to, you're going to have to nurture it because you know that you have to ask people for hundreds, possibly thousands, possibly tens of thousands of dollars every month.
Yeah.
You've got to have that long cycle. You can't rely simply on, again, the trade show to do the heavy lifting or the booth to do the heavy lifting. And we put all our eggs in this one basket for 2 days and somehow our company is going to succeed. I mean, I guess it can happen, but then that has more to do with luck than it does
There's a lot of risk there. You're not really covering your bases. And I think, if you use the information correctly, like for sure, I think that you're creating more opportunities for yourself, which I think is something that, that's how I think a lot of that, back to the ROI versus, ROE discussion is that I think that, it's a different type of thing, is that I think that experiential and showing up to these things are contributing more to a long game type strategy as opposed to just really quick hitting results.
So it's, the strategy used to be, we're going to go to this trade show and we're going to get leads.
Mm-hmm.
And now the most beneficial strategy is actually, we're going to go to this trade show and we're going to use it to reinforce our brand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
introduce our brand in a very positive way. Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, is that, I do think that, there are opportunities for emerging brands, like people who are brand new to, I think, make more of a splash at some of these things, or make a splash that matters to them more. Because, when these companies are still growing and getting into retailers and things like that, it's good to just, have that presence and be in a room with folks that they maybe wouldn't have had a chance to be introduced to before. But I think that there are specialized trade shows that are starting to come out for emerging brands so that they're not having to pay South by Southwest prices,
right?
To have any sort of presence there.
Right.
So that's one thing that's really cool.
So I think with where we landed on this, if you're, again, let's just assume that it's, I don't know if budget strapped is the word, but the way that you kind of level up from just having an apparent, just being present and having, giving away some tiny little Snickers. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's called fun size, yeah.
Yeah, it is fun size. And there's nothing fun about it, especially in a trade show. That guy's charging my iPhone with a little battery pack, and now you're giving me a Snickers and it's not even branded.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the way you level up that experience, one is to see if you can grab somebody who of note who can advocate. So if you're if you do cookware, right? Yeah. Then see if you can get a famous chef to come in and start cooking on your cookware, or talk about why they would cook on your cookware, right?
I think, but back to our point about authenticity with that, is that I think, it needs to be a thing where it's not just that chef coming in and, being like, buy this product, No,
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Is that I think it's a thing that, they need to be involved in the process when it comes to, what are we going to do in this booth? What are we going to talk about? Like, I think that it's something that they really should be involved in that process so that they can speak to it, in a way that they feel comfortable, and you get the most out of that partnership.
Well, and I think when you're talking about companies going to a trade show, whether they've got millions of dollars or they are cash strapped, it's not necessarily how much do you need to spend to do this, but if you're going to do this, think about it in a way that you want to drive engagement rather than just, hey, buy this.
Yeah, and can be a part of that bigger longer term.
Right. Where if you go in, the thing is that you need to recognize that there's risk with too little budget, right? And doing the wrong thing with too little budget rather than doing the right thing with too much budget, that puts you at risk on the other side, but you have more opportunity for success if you have been very intentional about it.
But at the same time, spending $0, there's a difference between, here's my PowerPoint deck on auto advance on a TV behind me, and if you ask a question, I'll answer it, and creating a PowerPoint deck that asks and answers questions and having someone actively guiding someone through it. Like, it's not necessarily how much money do I need to spend? It's how you should actually think about this entire process that ultimately has the most benefit.
So I'm guessing you're saying don't do the auto advance thing. I wasn't sure which side of that you landed on.
So diving into the experience thing, if you're going to a trade show and you're thinking about, well, we're going to go to a trade show, we've got a PowerPoint deck, we'll be there to answer questions if anyone has it, That's one way to think about it. You're showing up and you're just being there.
Right.
And then if you think about, okay, well, how can I provide an experience that will actually make someone like my brand? Then you can create a.
Well, first of all, you're not using PowerPoint if you're trying to get somebody to like your brand. But go on.
Well, it doesn't matter what tool you use, though.
Just the typical demo presentation.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you think about it in such a way, or you set up that deck to actually let someone go through your product, if you set it up to create an experience for people, whether that's just them playing on a computer with whatever product you have, or it's so variable depending on what you do.
The way that we think about it sometimes is really, sometimes all that we'll get from brands is basically their brand guidelines and, everything that they stand for and that they're about. And so we have to take that, sort of channel that information down. But I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring that deck to life, like in an experience standpoint, is that, without having, people's attention in a boardroom and a slide by slide, this is what we can do for you is how can we make that super clear and fun and engaging. And so I think that's taking those things and making them experiential.
Well, it's a way to it's a mind shift. It's a different way to think about it, because you could spend $10,000 on a booth that does nothing for people, or you could spend $10,000 on a booth that.
So I think I think it comes back to, what is your intent? Is your intent simply to be there and have eyeballs in front and then say, we got those brand touches, or can you change that intent? Which I think we're all advocating for right now.
Right.
To say you're going and experiential. I don't want to say, but again, to interact with the brand in a meaningful way leaves you with an understanding of what we do and what the benefits are. It gives you something that you actually want to go out there and advocate for. And so that's kind of where your specialty lies, as I understand it. Right, is you can create these experiences, and you have created these experiences that are, people leave and they want to talk about it, either on social or go back home and talk about it.
And that's something that it takes sort of a blend of everything that we were talking about. When we first started talking, we were talking about what is experiential and all that, and it can happen in an event, but I think one of the best ways to do it, if you have the recognition and if you have the wherewithal, is to basically own the experience that you're creating, as opposed to tacking on to something like Lollapalooza or any major event like that. Figure out a way to give people an amazing time, and
it's all under your tent.
And you don't, and it's
don't
not
mean to use tent. Different use of the word tent there. Sorry.
bigger, much better tent. Yeah,
it's your circus. So yes, you want your brand to own the experience.
And I think that can be achieved with partnering brands too. But I think it's a thing that everything that we were talking about, where that time frame is so small of how you can get people's attention. If you provide something that's truly valuable to your consumers or to the people that want to interact with you, you can do it in a way where you're already giving them an outside value just with what you're doing, but also you can work in different parts of your brand, or start to establish really firm touch points for these people about how they can interact with your brand in the future, and the different stuff that you're doing. If you're committed to doing more experience-based things.
Okay, so put that down in some practicalities rather than just an abstract.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things, especially for national brands, when we're talking about that, is that any city that you activate in, I think needs to be specific to that city. So if you're going to do a pop-up event, right? Let's say that it is a launch for a new cereal brand, right? And you want to do that in Austin, Texas. It's a thing that if you are bringing in, musical talent, or if you're bringing in, different like chef's talent to come in and mix your cereal into stuff, or different, mixologies and the mixologists in the city to come in, is that you need to pay attention to that kind of detail when creating that event. And I think it's a thing that, you start with that pop-up event, right? And then that might move into some of those event sponsorships. So you're in Austin and you're doing something, and then, you're sponsoring or you're highlighting 2 or 3 artists that are coming to your event. Then you turn around and you go to different music venues in Austin, because you've already started, to branch that gap.
Right. Where do we continue to be where these people play that we were talking to initially?
Trying to get them to our event. How do we have presence in all of those places in a way that, goes back to authenticity? And I think, is really about having those finely tuned moments where, if it's a late night show, there's a moment where, a bunch of, cereal bars are passed out to the crowd or something like that. It's a thing that it's not intrusive, but it's a thing that could, genuinely fill a need, and is a follow-up from something that you did 2 weeks earlier on your own.
So all I'm thinking about right now is my cereal brand for local musicians.
I really want cereal now.
So anyway.
But I think and that can be fueled by different social stuff around the city, and that I think is a thing that it works really well.
But it's a campaign at that point.
It's a local and it's a campaign that's fueled by experiential, and it can incorporate digital, and it can incorporate just influencer sponsorships or different things like that, and that's a local campaign, and that's something that you can use that as a model to apply to any city. But and it can become part of something that's like much bigger. But I think that when clients come to us, and they do this a lot, as far as saying we want to go on a mobile tour, a cross country tour,
they're thinking they're going to stop at one city, do their thing, and then move on to the next city,
and not change a thing. And and I think that there are so many different touch points that they can hit along the way to actually get those results and those returns that they're really looking for. But it takes for them to really look at who they're talking to, why they're talking to those people, and what the best, most authentic way is to reach them, and just create all of these crossovers where they're starting to understand why that brand fits into their life.
Right. So whether we're talking about setting up a booth at a conference, or we're talking about just wanting to getting into experiential marketing. Yeah. People need to think about it as a campaign.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. One of the terms that's been thrown around a long time is 360. It's like 360 degree. It's it has all these touch points, and I think that requires people to look past experiential as just event marketing or just as trade show booths. I think it's a thing that retail's experiential at this point. I don't know if you guys have seen any Red Bull interactive displays that are going around, but it's like all there are endless amounts of touch points, and the trend is 100% them going to being more, experience driven or more interactive. And so it's a thing that, why not connect those dots, and why not figure out new ways of strengthening the message at each of those places with the people that you truly believe that you're selling to, and the people that you really believe are your consumers.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any other questions. So when we talk about that place of diminishing returns, and so would you consider, again, a client who's going to go on a national tour and they're going to stop in these major cities and they're going to do their thing, right? Like if they don't have a follow-up plan, would you consider that kind of a space of diminishing returns? If their campaign isn't looking to continually reach that same audience in that same city, is it like, well, yeah, you can do that, but you're probably throwing money away at that point?
Oh yeah, no, I think it has to be a part of a longer term solution. Is that it depends on what type of brand you are and what you're trying to do, but for a lot of times we get mass cross-country tours, and they are often tied around sampling. So it's either, whether it's a spirits or liquor brand that's trying to figure out how to get into the most amount of bars, or back to cereal, if it's a cereal brand that's trying to activate at colleges, sports arenas, any place like that. Is that what's the plan when you come back next year? And is there a plan to come back next year? And if not, how do you plan on, facilitating the connections that you made and the amount of people that, have tried your product for the first time or have learned something new about your product for the first time? And now with, social media and with the amount that brands are spending in the digital space, I think connecting those things together and not viewing them as separate initiatives where like, oh yeah, we're having, the truck out giving away samples over here while we're running, a completely separate program over here. I think it
should all be integrated.
Right.
It should be integrated as much as possible because, there are definitely oftentimes on purpose, competing or, parallel messages from brands depending on where they go. But it's a thing that, I think, there is a lot of, return left on the table because, different brand groups aren't talking to each other within the same company and really figuring out how they can, just make these true connections and do it with experiential too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Dannon, did you have any other questions?
No, not really.
Here, let's give it up to Connor for getting engaged.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
Watch out, he's off the market now. He's been off the market for 4 years.
It's official.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
We need to have him build us a booth. Yeah. We're not going anywhere for a trade show. We just want to set up a booth on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Those are my favorite types of booths.
So why do lemonade sales? Why do lemonade stands fail?
It's all brand.
I don't trust those kids have washed their hands. That's why.
There you go. You're
going to try and charge me $1 for a lemonade? Fuck you. Yeah. You spent like your parents, by the way, they spent $1.15 on that concentrate. Yeah. And now you're coming out.
Well, it's also about knowing your market, It's like
those kids don't do anything for research. They'll just set up. They aren't paying even attention to the weather.
It's there's no schools in the area, and then
Whenever I come across a kid's lemonade stand, I make a point to stop and then tell them everything they're doing wrong with their marketing.
Well, one,
you have to
set up next to a place where cars stop, so they don't have to get out of their car.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Right.
Yep.
And then.
Yeah, set up in the middle of the street because then you're by the driver's side door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a group of kids in Chicago that live by Wrigley Field that are running a pretty smooth operation. So they have somebody set up right by Murphy's. They have somebody set up on the entrance to Halstead. And then they also have somebody on Fremont. And it's the same group of kids, but they're just upcharging and hitting at the right times during Cubs games.
So now I just want to go do a documentary.
They're incredible. No, they're great.
All right. So ultimate experiential experience you've been involved with.
That I've been a part of?
Yeah.
Okay. There was, there are two, and I think I'll go with one because it's topical because baseball season just started.
Are you a baseball nerd?
I'm such a baseball nerd.
Okay. Seriously?
I lived.
Cut this whole thing.
Did you move to the wrong town? I don't know.
No. So I actually lived behind Wrigley. That's how I know of the infamous, lemonade stand children. I lived behind Wrigley for a year and a half, and we had a client, Hefty Reynolds, which are the hefty.
Reynolds
the trash bags. Right.
Yeah.
So they have a sponsorship with Wrigley Field where they have all of the cup holders. They have a big Hefty sign every time that they hit a home run. They have the Hefty home run tracker on the jumbotron, and they also have red cups. They have red cups as a competitor to Solo, and they're great. They're crack resistant, and they don't. You can fold them up in your pocket and then go to the bathroom and then come out and unfold it.
I'm sold.
Yeah, it's great stuff. But so we had one media day with that Chicago Cubs partnership that we could do something. It could be on the field. It could be a tour with VIP guests, and we set the world record for the world's largest flip cup game, the drinking game. So it was a little over 100 versus 100 on the field. We had David Ross, who was the catcher at the time, and one of the pitchers, Jason Hamill, come in, and it was basically, them just cheering on fans as they were on Wrigley Field. And,
nice. Oh, wow. Nice.
So that was like a personal favorite for me, for sure. Just the scene of being on Wrigley Field and just having people play flip cup. The owner of the Cubs was, there, he's kicked off the game too early. It was like madness, but it worked out okay. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. No, that was a good one. Yeah.
What was number 2 now?
Number 2 was this is one of the coolest ones, I think, just because of the amount of people that worked on it and the model that we applied to it. But it was something that we did actually at the office that I worked at in Chicago. And so a lot of the people worked upstairs, and then we had a bunch of, it was like sort of a multi-purpose space downstairs. And so our client was Adidas at the time, and they came to us for this launch, the relaunch of Addy Color, which is just this, the monochromatic like tracksuits and, different shirts and shorts that they were coming out with. And so they had these really cool spots that were like all of these kids just like, chilling, being Adidas cool, while all of these scenes of like, everything was blue in the room and then everything was yellow, and they were exploring what those colors meant. So we did that. We brought that to life experientially, where,
Nice.
We had 4 different areas and then one central dance, rainbow area in the middle. And it was a thing where, we had the yellow room, which had the rays of sunshine, the dandelions, bathtub filled with yellow duckies that people could get in and take a photo with. We had, the red room that was like all magnet themed, the green room, which was all like, we had like a squirrel topiary and, just like.
Now, how did people find this experience?
So that was, definitely going back to what we were talking about before, as far as just like, working in all of these different parts of the marketing mix, is that, one, Adidas Originals does an amazing job of, really getting into the communities that they're in. So they're doing stuff all the time at their store, in the community. They're sponsoring things, they're highlighting different artists. And so they have that base on their own in Chicago. But then also we partnered with Ian Eastwood and the Young Lions, who are this dance crew who have been doing stuff in Chicago for a long time, really, really talented. And we actually put them in the Addy Color collection that was coming out, as opposed to like putting it on mannequins or putting it on display. We had the dancers, wearing it, because it's kind of this like fun, active streetwear thing.
Right.
But so we had the combination of Adidas, the NX had a little bit of following, but then really Ian Eastwood and the Young Lions just created this whole, this confluence of all of these people that Adidas wanted to hit. It was the active dancers, it was the artists, and then, it was the people who were already their loyal customers. And so, it was really, really packed, and the energy that came out of it was, one of the craziest things was 2 or 3 kids that were there had cameras, and they released like case study videos on the event before we could even before our editors even had a chance to do it.
Wow.
And so we were like looking up the hashtag online, and like it was just these like fully like amazingly produced like videos of kids like dancing into space. It was crazy. Yeah.
Like the worst. So I've worked with a handful of like wedding photographers and wedding videographers, and people with cell phones are the worst.
Yeah.
Because they take the picture, they put the filter on it, and it's up online before the wedding's over, and you're like, and then they're not going to see my pictures for another 6 weeks.
Yeah. And then the people get it, and they're like, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, I saw everything on Becky's Instagram." But
that's awesome, and that's a nice example of using like getting in touch with that local community there and using that specifically, because I have no idea who they are.
Yeah,
but I'm also not the target market.
You don't know who Adidas is?
Well, I know who Adidas is. I don't know who Ian Eastwood and the Young Lions are.
Right. I mean, he's somebody who has tons of the dancers in the group are from Chicago, and have tons of networks there, and those match up with a lot of the people that Adidas wanted to go after.
But I agree with Dannon. I mean, what I like about both of those examples that you did is that they're following kind of what we were talking about, which is it's not a one and done thing. No, you're in these communities, you're making an impact, you're making a splash, but then you're still there. You can still be found.
Right.
So you can still find Hefty in the stadium. Right. Their presence apparently is everywhere. Yeah. And then that's where the event takes place.
Well, they're both using experiential marketing as a way to amplify what they're already doing.
Right. And you're having your advocates carry the water for you.
Yeah.
Which is, so much. So it's such a better route.
Yeah.
Than trying to tell people you're cool. I've been trying to tell people I'm cool for a very long time.
You need third-party valation, and I've talked to Sarah, and
she's not going to give it. I know. I got it. But yeah, I mean that's it. It makes such a difference. So yeah, I love the fact that both of those examples are of brands, obviously huge brands, but brands that are doing it right. That's part of the reason they're huge brands.
All right. Yeah. Now that since you're an experiential marketing expert, 30 seconds, Meow Wolf, go.
Oh, Meow Wolf. Okay. So,
you have 20 seconds now. I don't know.
I checked out the documentary a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to put literally everybody that I've seen, or talked to. I've trying to put them onto it, just because I think it's such a unique look at the creative process, especially of like a group as they're forming, and just that whole thing where they talk about it as the beast, and how much it consumes you. The one thing that I'll say about it is that they're getting so big so fast, and the things that they're able to do and that they have done are phenomenal and out of this world, and they really are doing a good job of, for the most part, staying true to local artists and infusing them into the process. But when you get that big, I've just seen so many companies get so big that certain things get lost in translation or fall through the cracks. So I love them, love their work, love everything that they've done. I just don't want to see them fall victim to what I've seen a lot of other giant conglomerate, big money companies fall to.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can find us on omnifonic.com. That's the German spelling with an F.
Yes, German.
Yeah. And then we'll have show notes. We'll have a link to Pineapple Agency's site.
Awesome.
And
which is awesome, by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
And that's it. That's it for this episode.
Thank you guys so much again.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We'll have you back.
All right.
Cool.
All right. Thanks.